Well, good morning. I think first off, I should start out by saying that I really enjoyed last week's message by Matt. I wish he was here today so I could tell him that. Also, the title of my message today is Persistent Pays. But back to his message, after the sermon was over, we interviewed 20 people, and out of those 20 people, 85% agreed that they liked the sermon. Okay? And if you remember right, that's not funny in and of itself, but he gave us a lot of statistics. So if you remember the 3 people that we interviewed that didn't like it, I asked them why they didn't like it. They said, well, we hear it at home all the time. But I really wanted to thank Matt for that message. It really was good, and he did have a lot of statistics, and some of that was rather, I always find that stuff interesting, but it was really kind of shocking on some of it as well. Well, before I get started, I wanted to, 2 things. First off, the music was great this morning. I want to thank Mavis especially, whose fingernail colors match my tie. And that was a great song. That's one of my favorite songs. And then the one that we just sang I really like too. So, we talked about being superstitious a little bit in our Sunday school class this morning, just in athletics. You know how a baseball player won't change his socks if he's in a hitting streak, and that kind of stuff. And when 2 of your favorite songs come up in the same message, you kind of wonder if that's fate. But really, what it is it's just God under control. And maybe that was just a way of encouraging me this morning that things are going to go good. Because when I wrote this message, I put it all on paper, and I will tell you right now, it was one of the best messages I've ever given. But until I get it from here to here, we really won't know if that's true or not. So Persistence Pays is the title of my message. Now, every time I spoke since my grandmother passed away, I like to honor her because she really enjoyed coming to church, and she had a great sense of humor, and especially when it came to things little kids might say. And so, I was kind of thumbing through trying to find a good example of my grandmother's sense of humor, and I came upon this one, and it had to do with this little 4-year-old. His mother was getting a plate of cookies ready for Santa Claus. It's Christmas time, and she dropped the plate of cookies on the floor and picked it up and said, this is okay because Santa will never know. And then the little 4-year-old daughter looks at her and says, Mom, if Santa knows if I'm good or bad, he's going to know those cookies are on the floor. And that's the kind of thing that she really liked. If you'll turn to 2 Thessalonians 3, verse 13, I want to read this verse. It says, But ye, brethren, be not weary in well-doing. Okay, that's a really short little verse. And I want you to turn also to Galatians 6:9, and you can bookmark both of those. Galatians 6:9 says, And let us not be weary in well-doing, for in due season we shall reap if we faint not. What I'm here today to talk to you about is persistence pays. In due season we shall reap if we faint not. This is what the Bible tells us. But I want you to understand what the impact of this verse really means. When you look at a lot of the references in the New Testament, you can find the roots of those meanings and what those verses say in the Old Testament. Plus, it doesn't hurt to know what the meanings are, and just from a definitional standpoint. I want to say that sometimes these little technical difficulties that we experienced early, the words not being up there, and none of us recalling what's being said, and I'm that way. When I have a technical difficulty, it's because technically I don't know what I'm doing. Okay, that's because we have these difficulties. We don't know what we are doing. But what are we really being told here? what is the impact of this verse and this phrase, we will be not weary in well-doing, for in due season we will reap if we faint not? Well, let's look at some definitions. First off, let's look at the definition of these words. And we're going to look at weary, well-doing, season, reap, and faint not. And I'm going to try to bring a few little examples in from my life, which a lot of you don't know me, some of you do. I did grow up here in the area, so if you've moved in, we just need to get to know each other, okay? And then you can relate with this kind of stuff. But I'm going to let you in on a little of my background today. Hopefully, I know after these last 2 weeks, with Matt last week and me this week, and in some respects, we're all going to be real anxious for Ken to get back. I really do appreciate his teaching, and I know that he's got to be having fun with his family. I know that Ken's kind of competitive, and I know he's wanting to hike with his son, and I know how the father-son thing works, and how, you don't want to. The one thing right now, Andy, what we hope for, now you're a little younger than me, I just hope that I don't get left totally in the dust and forgot, if we're walking or hiking or whatever, we still aspire to be good if you're competitive, but I know that he's going through that, and I just hope he keeps up, everything's fine, and he comes back in one piece, and I know I'll be looking forward to hearing what his message is next week. Now, if you look at the definition of weary, this means tired, exhausted, fatigued, and this can be mental or physical. But there's another part of the definition. If you look at, there's one aspect that I really want to hit. It means to make or become disconnected or impatient, especially by the long continuance of something. All right? So if you're weary, you can be tired, but you can just be tired of it. You can be discontented. You can be bored. I've heard a lot of kids say, well, I'm really bored. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. I'm tired of doing this. And, that's after about 3 minutes of, helping math or something, right? So I'm tired of it. It's become disconnected, impatient, especially to the long continuance of something. So when you look at well-doing, we see, let's turn to 1 Peter 2:15. 1 Peter 2:15 says, "For so is the will of God, that with well-doing ye may put to silence the ignorance of foolish men." Okay, now we could go into who foolish men is and definitions on that. But put to well-doing, this is the will of God, that with well-doing you may put to silence the ignorance of foolish men. And if you look at 1 Peter 3:17, it says, "For it is better, if the will of God to be so, that ye suffer for well-doing than for evil-doing." So he doesn't expect us to do well-doing and not get a reward. But he says if you do suffer for well-doing, that's better than suffering for you not doing well. Okay? So these are two verses that I want you to remember as far as well-doing. And then turn to Romans 2:6 through 11. This says, this is talking about God and how He will render to every man according to his deeds. To them who by patient continuance in well-doing seek for glory and honor and immortality, eternal life. But unto them that are contentious and do not obey the truth, but obey unrighteousness, indignation and wrath, tribulation and anguish upon every soul of man that doeth evil, of the Jew first and also to the Greek. But glory, honor, and peace to every man that worketh good, to the Jew first and also to the Gentile, for there is no respect of persons. And we know this. We know that God is not discriminatory. Okay? God sees everybody the same. And So all of these things apply to, as it says, the Jew first and then to the Gentile. And that pretty well includes all of us. Okay, it doesn't leave anyone out. God is the same to everyone. And we should take comfort in that, shouldn't we? It's a good thing he's that way, because most of us don't deserve any special favors from God, but yet he gives them to us anyway. So let's read this verse again. It says, "Let us not be weary in well-doing, for in due season we shall reap if we faint not." So now we know what weary is, and now we know what well-doing is. Let's look at season. Now, what do you think of when we think of season? We think of spring, winter, summer, fall. And I thought there was only 4, but where does autumn fit? Okay? So there's seasons, okay? There's times of year, and a lot of it relates to weather, sun, that kind of stuff, nature things, okay? But here we go. I'm going to read you the definition of season. Number 1, it's a division of the year. We just covered that. It's like, though you can have specific times, like hunting season, open season, fishing season, football season. Okay, I knew you guys were thinking I'd say, but you thought I'd say basketball or baseball. Okay, but sports season, okay? Anyway, for a sports enthusiast like myself, I couldn't let this go. If you turn to Ecclesiastes 3:1, this says, "To everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under the heaven." So there's a proper time for everything, isn't there? I have to tell you, I just saw a commercial on TV the other day, and it was on the news. And it wasn't really a commercial, I guess it was a little news clip. And what they were talking about was the farmers markets up in Pueblo and Colorado Springs that they have. Maybe some of you saw this. They were talking about if you in a farmer's market, if you see sweet corn or cantaloupe or watermelon on the shelves and they say it's homegrown, it's not, because it's not in season for our area. And so now we're just now approaching the Colorado season for cantaloupe, watermelon, tomato, cantaloupe, all that stuff. So there's definitely a recognition that if something is in season or out of season out in our society, isn't it? If it's not right, it's just like, skiing in a bathing suit. That's just not right. It's not matching up. So this is the season. There is a time for everything. Now, I told you I was going to tell you a little bit about me more, so turn to 2 Timothy 4:2, I believe it is. It says, "Preach the word, be instant in season, out of season, reprove, rebuke, exhort with all long-suffering and doctrine." Okay, so, as it's different with crops growing in and out of season, we're always to be instant, preaching the word in season and out of season. And I remember one time I gave a devotion a long time ago. It was back in the other building before this part was even built. And I had a sports coach, Lucky Ishida, who still coaches junior high, unless he's retired, and I didn't know about it, but I think he still coaches. And he told me just not long ago, within a few months, he said, "I still remember that devotion you gave on being instant, in season, and out of season." And I can remember that too, because sports was a big thing to me growing up. And I talked that time about practicing year-round. At that time, it was after my college days, but it was to be practicing and being prepared and getting ready for the in-season while you were out of season. I had a high school coach that was a really good coach, but I think one of the reasons he was a good coach was that he was a very good motivator. He gave us a lot of things to shoot for, okay? He gave us some goals. He came up with this deal, and I'm sure he stole it, but he said he came up with it. It's an idea for if you practiced from the time school was out till the first day of basketball season the next year, 200 hours, you'd get this little plaque thing. And if you did 300 hours, you would get this other thing. Well, that was really above and beyond. If you count the number of days from May 20th that year to October 15th, which was the first legal starting practice day back then, that's 147 days. So if you divide the number of hours that it would take to practice, that means